Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special interview from Game Informer. I'm Alex Stadnick. I'm GI's largest video editor. Today, we are humbled to be joined by the one and only Mike Daly from Insomniac Games, the game director on Ratchet Clank Rift Apart. Mike, hello, sir. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing great. I'm super excited to talk about the game.
Good. Yeah, I am very excited as well. So we got questions here that we're going to go over. We have a little bit of time here. So did you always have a plan for Ratchet to find more lombaxes? As you know, as anyone in the game who's played the games know, he's always looked for another furry friend.
Yeah, you might have noticed a few hints in the past of the series that Ratchet is on the lookout for where the lombaxes went and what's sort of going on in the other dimensions. Mm-hmm. This time around, Ratchet gets pulled into another dimension and discovers his dimensional counterpart. So it's not quite what he was looking for as far as finding his family, but rather sort of finding a version of himself that never had the advantage of meeting their best friend Clank and helping them sort of grow together and become galactic heroes. So this new character, Rivet, that they meet is sort of like the one that you'll follow along her sort of like growth path as she learns to be a teammate and tackle this big challenge.
For sure. Because like we talked about, right? He was the only lombax. Like, what was the process in the beginning of getting Rivet? Like, was it always going to be, Jennifer Hale led character? Like, what was the process like of finally introducing another lombax?
Well, the story definitely went through a lot of iteration, but from the genesis of the game, we knew we were going to target the PS5 and we had an idea of what its capabilities were. And a lot of the brainstorming for the game kind of spawned from that kernel where we were like, well, what sort of new gameplay could we do that we've never been able to do before? What sort of new fun stuff could we do with weapons we've never been able to do before? And so from that brainstorming came the idea of dimensional rifts that connect vastly disparate worlds. And then from the concept of dimensional rifts was a parallel dimension that has sort of like gone astray and has a lot of differences from the base one. So you combine that with the fact that we wanted to continue Ratchet and Clank's story arc because we really love sort of all the adventures they've been on and we want to give the fans of that more. But we know that it's going to be a lot more exciting to explore character development from the perspective of a new character, especially one that sort of lets you know more about Ratchet and Clank themselves by sort of providing this contrast. So this, in a way, Rivet was born from the PS5 itself. It sort of led us down that path of brainstorming that created the seeds of the story that we kept iterating on.
For sure. So, and just to be clear, this was always going to be a PS5 project, right? Because Ratchet, we had the 2016 game, which I love, but we haven't had a really new Ratchet story in quite some time.
Yes, it was going to be a PS5 exclusive and a full-length title pretty much from the inception, which is awesome because that is kind of, in the same way a lot of Ratchet fans have been itching for that game, we've been itching to make that game. So it was really kind of a dream come true.
Definitely. So you touched on earlier, right? The idea of these rifts and pulling yourselves into it using the SSD, right? Did that concept come from the PS5 or were you always like, yo, what if we were like diving through holes in time and space, right?
Yeah, we were inspired to pursue that concept only pretty much because we knew that there was the potential to actually achieve it using tech. So that was sort of the inspiration. It's like, we've got the SSD. What is the coolest thing we can do with it that is also a ratchety thing? And this is what came out of that.
For sure. Was there a point in like the testing phase, right, where you're like concepting this idea and then you saw it and you're like, oh, like this is what we were thinking or one, like, does that make sense? You know what I mean? Like seeing it in action.
Yeah. Well, when we had the notion of like two dimensions connected by rifts, we explored a lot of different ways rifts and dimensionality could manifest, both in terms of like gameplay and storytelling. Mm-hmm. And we ended up using several in the game. So like our prototype phase went broad picked out sort of the best and the concepts that complemented gameplay the best and all folded them in. So we use dimensionality in a few different ways.
Okay, cool. Over the course of the game, is it all going to be mostly narrative reasons we're switching between Ratchet and Rivet, or is there any point where we're going to be able to like pick your character?
So the overarching story of the game sort of has Ratchet and Rivet working in parallel to help solve the dimensional cataclysm. They've each sort of got their own job they have to do, and that's how the plot advances. But in sort of like true Ratchet fashion, a lot of times you'll hop into your ship and you'll have a choice of which planet to tackle next. So there's flexibility in the order in which the events play out because of these parallel tracks. Also, like past Ratchet games, there's a lot of sort of meaty and interesting optional stuff to do on each planet, little side paths to explore or like subplots within the level's stories. So you can go back to previously visited planets and take care of all that extra content. When you do, basically you will play as the lombax that played through that planet when they first arrived there for story reasons. So basically the two lombaxes tag team the planets. You can sort of travel freely around the galaxy at most points in the game. And so that's how both you choose your planet and you choose which lombax you're playing as.
Okay, cool. And then do Ratchet and Rivet have the same progression paths for weapon and experience?
Yeah, so not only do they have the same progression paths, we found that when you bounce back and forth between the two heroes, a lot of the moment-to-moment rewards for playing well weren't quite as enticing if you knew that it was only going to be useful for like half the game. So we connected their progression paths so that if you level up as one hero, you level up as the other hero. If you purchase a weapon as one, you don't need to keep track of which hero has which arsenal. They all sort of stay connected and stay in sync. So the progression part of the game all flows sort of very fluidly. You don't have to think a whole lot about it. It just sort of like works.
For sure. Going into more of like the systems and stuff like that. You guys have made a couple of games since the last like original Ratchet title. Spider-Man, Sunset Overdrive, games that really have amazing fluid moment-to-moment movement, right? I'm curious, what lessons did you guys learn from those games when coming into Ratchet that, people are looking forward to having these characters back, right? But also we're looking forward to something a little bit like newer feeling, right?
Yeah. So some of the big takeaways from those games were we always want to improve how responsive the hero feels to play. So we're very permissive about the timing of your inputs and sort of the canceling of one move into another. So whenever you like press your buttons to do the moves, we're more or less like always trying to get at what you were intending to do and help you get there so that it all feels like it's flowing and it's doing what you want it to. That includes putting in sort of like subtle assist features that just get that player intent across. Another takeaway from the games that we've made since past Ratchet games is if you broaden the move set of the hero just a little bit wider than what they actually need to do any given thing, then there's this avenue for player expression and a higher skill ceiling as you can sort of make how you cross this gap or how you navigate this threat, how you close distance, really your own thing. And that makes executing it that much more satisfying, that you're not just recognizing a long gap and using the long jump to get across it.
So we've seen Rivet, which very excited. Can't wait. Is there an alternate version of Clank we should be looking for?
I think it's going to be really fun to see how the two dimensions are the same and how they've diverged. So you'll be meeting a lot of interesting new characters. But as to which ones you'll find, I'm just going to leave that for players to discover on their own.
It'll be great. So you guys are using a different streaming approach to how worlds are created, right? Can we expect any gameplay differences from that?
When we designed our levels for this game, they started out structured like a traditional Ratchet planet, which is to say, we put the whole thing in memory at once, and it's sort of one continuous cohesive experience. Once we'd figured out sort of the bones of the experience, how we were going to tell our story and move you from beat to beat and get the pacing of combat and traversal just right, that's when we start cramming tons and tons of detail and art and sound and lighting. And that is the point at which it makes sense to change to a streaming mechanism. And so basically, like, once you go through the streaming version of the level, which has this super high concentration of unique high fidelity assets right around you, it's still based on the bones that was unconstrained by streaming. So you get the same experience.
For sure. Cool. As you're aware, I don't need to tell you, Mike, but Ratchet & Clank is known for its weapons and how crazy these get. Can you talk about talk about some of the new weapons, but also talk about how the DualSense enhances that experience and what you guys are doing with haptics through that?
Yeah, so we love our weapons. We love how sort of creative and sort of wacky and full of personality they are. The only way that's able to get through, the reason weapons are fun to fire in Ratchet is because of the feedback that they give. Like, Ratchet has a sort of hyper-real stylization where we're allowed to crank things up to 11 beyond what you'd sort of like expect out of it. And so because of that, we can give more bright, flashy particles. We can have more sort of like camera shake and scars in the ground. We can have bigger sounds that echo more, and we can have controller sensations that sort of like reflect all that, all at the same time, working together to sort of like convey this personality and the effect of what you just did by pulling the trigger. So basically, like, the power of the PS5's graphics processor, its 3D spatial audio, the power of Insomniac engines, rendering techniques, and the haptics and adaptive triggers of the controller all feed into really well this idea of give weapons the most impactful feedback they've ever had before.
That's amazing. I can't, as someone who's playing a lot of Returnal right now, I absolutely cannot wait for more uses of those triggers. So, staying in the gameplay realm, what is Ratchet without Clank? And Clank has always had a bit of his own adventure sections, right? Or, a little bit different gameplay sections. So, what can we expect from our little friend this time around?
So, in our scenario, there is a dimensional cataclysm, and the structural supports between their two dimensions are collapsing, which would be catastrophic eventually. Now, what Clank can do, what he's uniquely sort of positioned to do, given his history, is enter that structural area between dimensions and figure out a way to get the dimensional energy flowing again. So those are the Clank puzzles. When you come into a place where the dimensional structures are broken, he can hop into it, repair it, and then you'll be able to progress on your journey. So once you're inside, getting the dimensional energy flowing looks to him like getting a line of clanks from one end to the other. It's how he sort of visualizes this abstract concept. So if you've played Lemmings, it might look a little bit familiar. So Clank sort of explores these arenas, finding spheres of influence, like these orbs that he can plug into the environment to change the physics properties of these Clank lemmings, or to change the physics properties of the environment itself, or Clank. And it's using those tools that you sort of guide the line around. You look at the environment and you try and figure out what you need to do to get them from one end to the other. And that line of Clanks can help you get to new places as well if you place them correctly. So there's usually like a little bit of back and forth between Clank and the Clank lemmings to solve the puzzle. You
guys have showed off the new armor, right? How you can do those sexy new customization options, right? How do we obtain most pieces of those? How are players going to find those?
So a lot of pieces of armor are hidden in pocket dimensions, which you've seen. So you'll go a little bit off the beaten path, crack those open, find a concentrated traversal challenge. If you can get through it, you'll find a new armor piece. Also, those armor pieces can be found in certain like optional side paths or side quests throughout the galaxy. You can get some of them from, for example, completing arena challenges. So most of the armor in the game is just an optional thing that's a reward for doing more than the main story asks you to do.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mike. We really appreciate it. Game's coming out very soon on PS5, and we are looking forward to playing it. So thank you so much for your time, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Can't wait.